the guy that's been good and consistent the whole time, and who I read every morning in the hard copy of my newspaper that I subscribe to and urge more to do so, is Dave Weinberg, the beat reporter for the Eagles for the Press of Atlantic City. Dave, how are you on this Weinberg Wednesday, sir?
I'm doing well, Pete. How are you?
Doing okay. Got a little bit of a head cold, as I'm sure you can hear. So if I'm a little raspy, I apologize. One day's in the 50s, then it's like 25 degrees, matched by another 50. I just blame that guy Skeldon. It's his fault for the weather, right?
Yeah, that's a good move. Yeah, we blame it on him.
Sure. Speaking of blame, Dave, you had a good column today, another winner, where you say that the Eagles' failures are not Lane Johnson's fault. Well, at least that's what the headline said. And you talked about that in your column. Maybe get into that a little bit about the conversation you had with Lane Johnson and some of your points as to why he really shouldn't take full blame for where the Eagles are right now.
Yeah, I spoke with him yesterday, as everybody else did, and he was willing to take responsibility for everything that happened with this Eagles season, plus, everything else that's happened in society in the last 10 weeks. And as I pointed out, it's just it's ridiculous to lay this all on a right tackle. Granted, did his absence have something to do with the Eagles' struggles on their offensive line? Of course it did. He is one of probably their best offensive linemen, but you take him away from 10 games, it's going to have an effect. But last time I checked, he hadn't thrown any interceptions. He hadn't dropped any passes. He hadn't missed any tackles at the goal line. And it's just ludicrous to even, and Doug Pederson even kind of alluded to it last week, that, the season would have been totally different if Lane had been here. And that's just ridiculous to me.
Dave, wanted to ask you about Jason Peters, named to the Pro Bowl. Doug Pederson today basically gave him a ringing endorsement on having him back again next year. Do you think Jason Peters will be back? Are you hearing any rumblings from him personally about whether or not he wants to be, continuing his NFL career another year?
He wants to continue his NFL career. There's no doubt about that. He still thinks he can play like another 3-4 years. And he's quietly kind of hinted that he wants to come back to the Eagles. He hasn't really come out and said it yet. But I think the fact that Doug is his coach now, it was clear that he wasn't very happy with the way things were going under Chip Kelly. But under the new regime, they've taken really good care of him this year, gave him some breaks during practices, kept him reasonably healthy. So I think the fact that they did all that, they went out of their way to make sure that he was stayed fresh the entire year. I think he appreciated that, and that's why I think he'll want to come back.
When you look at this offensive line, then, if with Peters on the left, Lane Johnson on the right, now that he's back, and the wash in between, how do you think that plays out in the offseason and into next year? The rookie experience that these guys got, Sayamalu and Big V. How important will that be as they try to mold this offensive line of next year and the future?
In the future, I think it'll be pretty important. The more experience you can get for your young players, the better off you're going to be down the line. Unfortunately, in Big V's case, I think it's going to be taking a while for him to put that into effect. From like you were just saying, with Peters comes back and Lane Johnson's there really isn't any room for him. He's going to have to be that backup that every team needs, but you kind of were hoping a little bit more from a young player, but he's going to have to just wait his turn. With Samala's case, though, I would expect him to at least compete for a starting job. No one knows how Brandon Brooks's anxiety issue is going to play out. Don't know if they're going to stick with Stefan Wisniewski or Alan Barber at the other spot. So. I think there's going to be competition for the starting guards, and I think that Samalo will be in that mix.
Dave Weinberg with us from the Press of Atlantic City, covers the Eagles and is also their columnist. His column is called Extra Points. And Dave, I'm going to ask you sort of a multi-layered one here, since this is the first chance we get to catch up with you after what took place in Baltimore. A lot of discussion we had on Monday about that final 2-point conversion. A, should he have gone for 2 or kicked the extra point? And then B, where the heck was Ryan Matthews and why wasn't he on the field? Your take on that whole end-of-game sequence.
Well, when it initially happened, I really had no problem with him trying for it. I know, actually, Mark Melhorn and I had a discussion about it in our Eagles video, where he didn't think that they should have. He thought that they should go to overtime, but I disagreed for several reasons. One, they're not going anywhere. They really had nothing to lose, so why not just go for it right then and there and try to win the game? And perhaps more importantly, the fact that they have to come back and play tomorrow night. The more rest you can get your players, the better. So you really don't want to throw them out there for another quarter if you can help it. So I thought it made complete sense. And initially, I thought maybe the play call was questionable. And, like you said, Ryan Matthews wasn't out on the field. But Doug was pretty adamant that there was really no reason for him to do that, that they knew that the Ravens were going to go with a zero blitz. And running just wasn't going to be possible on that 2-point conversion. So that's the reason why Ryan wasn't out there. Whether you can debate, I guess, whether the actual call was the right move. Having Jordan Matthews coming across the middle, that didn't really, and then the ball wound up being tipped. But I had no problem with them going for it, and I can't fault them. I mean, they evidently knew that they evidently expected that play to work, so I can't really fault them for that either, I guess.
But
execution was off, but
right between that play and between the post-game press conference afterwards, and then the next day when Doug was asked about it, do you see a pattern though where Doug seems to just not get the opposing side or willing to acknowledge that? Because Scott and I have talked about, it seems like there's at least once a press conference where all the beat guys kind of look at each other like, what?
Yeah, he doesn't. Even right after the game, when people were asking him, why you went for two there, and his explanation was something about we ran the numbers and we had a less than 50% chance of winning in overtime. And we're like, well, what numbers are you talking about? You don't know if you're going to get the ball first or not. You don't know. I just don't. That didn't make any sense. He didn't do a very good job of explaining himself. I mean, it turned out, like I said, I think he made the right decision, but he didn't really explain himself very well. And that, like you said, that's kind of been the case at least once a week with him. He just doesn't do well under. I don't want to say under pressure, but you ask him something that maybe he's not expecting or that he's not really ready for, he kind of tends to struggle to come up with a suitable answer.
Dave, I know Doug was asked today, what have you learned about being a head coach? I'm curious to see what you think about how he's done over these first 14 games. How would you evaluate Doug Pederson as a head coach? And I guess a follow-up to that would be, do you think he's learning anything?
Boy, that's a tough one. What he's learned, or what I think. I think that he's been overwhelmed at times. There's been parts of this job that I don't know if he was just ready for. As I've mentioned before, when he was initially hired, there's just this nagging doubt in the back of my mind about the fact that he was the only guy that they really, or the Eagles were the only team that interviewed him. Where you had guys like Adam Gase and Ben McAdoo and the other guys who were kind of sought after by other teams, whereas, the Eagles were the only team to interview Doug, and that made me pause for a second and made me wonder whether he was really ready for that jump. And as it turns out, I think the doubts were kind of proven that I don't know that there's just parts of the job that he just doesn't, he seems to be overwhelmed by, fourth down plays, some just game day decisions, whether to challenge certain things or not. And I guess maybe that's to be expected from a young coach, but the fact that he's been around the league for so long as a player and as an assistant, you would think that he would have been ready for it. And the fact that he wasn't makes me wonder a little bit whether he was really ready to do this job.
And I'll read your words back to you that you wrote. There will be two rookie head coaches at Lincoln Financial Field on Thursday night. One of them has his team poised for a playoff run. The other one coaches the Eagles. What a great way to finish your column right there.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, Ben certainly turned into, the perfect fit. The fact that he was with the Giants before didn't hurt. And it's kind of weird because I'm not really that impressed with the Giants. There's really, like, other than the receipt than Odell Beckham and their defense is better, but they're not like world beaters or anything. But yet they found a way to get to 10-4. You got to give them credit for it,
including 2 wins over the Cowboys.
Right. I mean, they're still in line to maybe even win the NFC East. That's not beyond their own possibility either. I mean, I don't think the Cowboys have anything sewn up by now by a long stretch. So, the Giants have been real surprising to me, and then Ben McAdoo deserves all the credit for that.
Scott Grayson was down in Baltimore over the weekend and related this story on Monday's show that he was in the locker room and saw Jeffrey Lurie having an animated discussion with Malcolm Jenkins and Brian Dawkins.
Brandon Graham.
Oh, so close. Brandon Graham and Brian Dawkins.
And Brian Dawkins was standing there listening, yeah.
So his point that on Monday was, is it possible that Jeffrey Lurie is starting to solicit opinions of, did I make the right choice with Doug? Do you see a scenario, or do you envision a scenario, Dave Weinberg, where Doug's out?
No. Jeffrey's never been one of those guys that's going to admit he made a mistake that quickly. He tends to be a guy who's going to, like, ride it out and see how things play out. So the fact that he was, on the hot seat, so to speak, he was the guy who pretty much hired Doug, if you want to get down to it. I mean, he sought out Andy Reid, asked Andy's opinion about this. Andy recommended Doug for the job, and that's how he wound up being here. So I don't think that he's going to go back on that after just 1 year. I think Doug will have at least 1 or 2 more years in order to prove himself and to prove that he's learned from his mistakes. I would be very, very surprised if he was let go after just 1 season.
And then they put that panel together where, like, Ron Jaworski was involved as well. It was like Ron Jaworski, Howie, Jeffrey, Don Smolensky. Well, is that just Jeffrey trying to create the illusion of, look, this isn't just me making these decisions. I've got talented minds working with me.
Yeah, he's not like a Jerry Jones. He doesn't want to necessarily, take credit for anything. And I do believe him when he says he did have those guys in there, and he did listen to their opinions and gain their insights and stuff. But when it comes down to it, it is Jeffrey Lurie's team, and I'm pretty convinced that, I am convinced that he was the one that made the choice. And when push came to shove, when it was clear that McAdoo wasn't going to be there or Gase, then it was pretty clear that he wanted Doug, and that was because Andy recommended him.
It's been an interesting few days, Dave, in that you've had Jalen Mills question the play call by Jim Schwartz, where the coverage on that one touchdown at the end of the first half, and then Schwartz replied, and then also Rodney McLeod not challenging Dixon on that touchdown run in Baltimore, and Schwartz had a bit of a different answer for that. I mean, how do you feel Jim Schwartz is doing managing these guys, and what did you make of that whole situation where, Schwartz says, yeah, we've had some conversations this week?
Yeah, that was pretty funny, especially the one about Mills. I'm going to take the microphone away from Jordan Hicks, and I'm going to put it in Jalen so he can give his permission for every call. That was really funny. Jim has done I don't think he's done as good a job as what people maybe were expecting, especially after like the first couple of weeks. Everybody was talking about him being the assistant of the year and being the shortlist for head coaching candidates, and that's clearly not going to happen now. And I think he let the season get away from him a little bit defensively. As far as what would happen with the Ravens, though, I'm really surprised at McLeod, because he has this reputation of being this aggressive, hard-hitting safety, and there's been like 2 occasions now where he's kind of played that Matador Olay kind of deal in the goal line, and he's always come up with rational explanations for it in his mind, but it was puzzling to me to see like any defensive player that would do that. He'd be one of the last ones I would expect it from. So that kind of took me aback a little bit. And Schwartz is generally, he's going to come to the defense of his players. He's not going to be he's not one to no coach really is one to like throw them under the bus. So. But privately, I think that's why he had the conversations that he had. I'm pretty sure he was pretty steamed at one went wrong. One went wrong on both with Jalen Mills and with Rodney McLeod situations.
That's a line we've heard on this program before. Praise in public, criticize in private. I think that came out of the lips of Sal Pal, but I think we all agree with that. Well, you said earlier, Dave, that the Giants really haven't done a lot to impress you. That said, their defense is much improved. And if you're an Eagles fan, you sit there and you look at this team coming in, the Giants team, and you go, well, gee, they bought themselves a defense. Why can't we fix our defense that way? Are the Eagles able to do that? Are they able to fix their defensive problems through free agency? Or are they able to, or do they need to draft guys?
Boy, that's a tough one. I think they have a core talent there already. I'm a big Jordan Hicks guy. I think he's got a bright future. Brandon Graham has certainly proven himself to be one of the top defensive ends. But there are holes clearly, and I think probably the way to go though is through the draft. I mean, they've tried the free agent route and the trade route before, especially at corner. They brought in a truckload of free agent cornerbacks over the last 5-6 years, and none of them have panned out. So I think it's time to. I think Mills has a lot of ability and a lot of potential. So I think you can maybe draft a guy. I would use if they have depending on who's available, but I would certainly expect them to use a first round pick on a corner this year, and maybe pair him with Mills and maybe see if he can grow something into like you have with Lito Shepherd and Sheldon Brown years ago.
That's been a popular question, and I think you answered it there. Corner of what position would you look to upgrade the most with the Eagles' first-round pick? And it sounded like you just said corner.
Yeah. I mean, wide receiver clearly has a need too, but from what I can gather, just from a preliminary research, it seems like corner is one of the deeper positions in this draft, and there's a lot of guys who are first-round ability. So I think if you use that pick you're going to get from Minnesota, no matter where it is, I think you're going to get a pretty good cornerback there, more so than a wide receiver.
Dave, let's talk about Thursday night, tomorrow night's game in Philadelphia. You got the Giants looking to clinch a playoff spot with a win. Eagles are relegated to playing the role of spoiler, but they're back at home where they've played pretty well this year. Short week. How do you see all this when you put it together, shaking out tomorrow night?
I think it's going to be a really close game. The Eagles they've shown me something these last couple of weeks with the Redskins and the Ravens. Granted, they didn't win, obviously, but it would have been very easy for them to lay down after what happened with Green Bay. But they showed some fight, they showed some heart that I was looking to see and I hadn't seen in a couple of weeks before that. So the fact that they came back and played with such determination against the Redskins and the Ravens, I think you'll see that again tomorrow night. And whether that's enough to win, I don't. They kind of have the Giants' number until recently. I mean, they had won 4 in a row until last month, and even that game came down to the end. So I wouldn't be shocked if the Eagles win, but considering my lousy record of predicting Eagles wins and losses this year, I can't pick them to win again until they actually do it. So I think the Giants will probably find a way to pull it out.
Well, and you do think, Dave, that the Eagles get a boost because Darren Sproles is going to be back, and then we saw what Ryan Matthews did in Baltimore, and you just argue off on the surface that bringing Lane Johnson back to a line that already had success against the number one rushing defense, you think the Eagles would be able to run the ball?
You would think so. Yeah, that's a valid point. However, things don't seem to ever go the way that they expect or that they want to, and it's almost like they're almost jinxed for whatever reason. I don't know what it is, but you're going to see like Eli Manning for like 400 yards, and Odell Beckham and even Victor Cruz will be doing that salsa in the end zone. I just have a feeling that's going to happen.
I know Doug was asked today that if they don't win the next 2 divisional games, they'd be winless in the division for the third time in franchise history. Did that make you raise an eyebrow?
Yeah, it did. I mean, they've had some really, really bad teams, but even those teams managed to at least win one division game. So that's a pretty damning statistic, and it kind of shows you that the NFC East is. I don't know if it shows you that the Eagles are that bad or that the NFC East is actually that good. I mean, they were the doormat of the NFL for so long, but now that division is arguably the best in football. So I guess if you're going to go winless in the division, I guess the NFC East is the one that you most likely do it in. But I think the Eagles have to just summon some sort of pride or determination or whatever. They just have to find a way to win one of these next two.
I thought the other thing that jumped out at me from today's presser with Doug was Giants are 8-2 in games decided by 7 points or less. Eagles 0-6. I mean, just that narrative that continues where they can't find a way to come up at the end, clutch.
Yeah, I was even talking to Malcolm Jenkins about this last week, where he said if you think about it, there's just been one or two plays in those 6 games that, if they make them or if they don't make them, in the case of being a mistake, the situation is totally different. They're right in the line for competing for the top wild card spot or maybe even in the division. But that just goes to show you the difference between a good team and a bad team or a mediocre team. The good teams find a way to make the plays that you need to make that in order to put yourself in a position to make the playoffs, whereas the young struggling teams always find a way to lose, and that's kind of been the theme of the entire season. They've been so close so many times, but they just can't find a way to get over that hump.
Let's kind of start closing with this, Dave. Carson Wentz, 2 games left here. He's made it through all 14 games, taken a number of hits, but he's still standing.
That's right. Yay.
What do you see out of him? I know he's got the occasional, got to get rid of the throwing off the back foot thing that led to an interception on his first pass attempt last week. And where do you make of his progress? Do you see him still growing?
I kind of think he's, I don't want to say regress, but I haven't seen like the progress that I was hoping to see. Like usually guys will get better as the year goes on once they get more experience and more comfortable with things. And to be honest, I haven't seen that with Carson yet. It seems like he got off to a really good start, but as the season has gone on, he's kind of leveled out a little bit. Made those he still have that tendency to make the early mistake that winds up putting the team in an early hole. And you would think by this point that wouldn't be a factor anymore, but it still seems like it is. And I still think he has a lot of potential and a lot of I think he is the right choice to maybe to be the franchise quarterback. But quite frankly, I was kind of hoping to see a little more progress out of him than I've seen. So hopefully these next 2 games, maybe he'll be able to figure out a way to avoid those mistakes and maybe get back on the right track a little bit.
Dave Weinberg, Press of Atlantic City. He's been an Eagles beat reporter for longer than some of our interns have been alive. You can find him on Twitter at Press AC Weinberg. By the way, when you were mentioning Mark Bellhorn earlier, I thought to myself, well, that was Northwestern overruling Appalachian State, so that was what the problem was, right? Wasn't that where you went?
There you go.
Good stuff, Dave. We appreciate you having on our Weinberg Wednesdays, and we look forward to catching up with you next week when hopefully we'll find out all the good things that took place in the Eagles-Giants game. Really appreciate the time, buddy.
Oh, well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Have a Merry Christmas.